This video is going to cover the topic of solving equations with percents. Be sure the date and topic are at the top of your page. The essential question for this video is how can we use equations or inequalities to solve questions about percentages? Percentages appear in life all the time, but we're going to focus on one particular aspect about percentages today. And that focus will be when something is increasing or decreasing by a certain percent. And of course, first we need to remember that a percent means out of 100. So that means, of course, that 5% means 5 out of 100. But of course, we also can write that as 500ths. And that's the form that we're going to be using the most in this video today, this decimal form. So let's say we go to Seattle, and there's an 8% sales tax. Well, what does that mean? What it means is that we have to pay an extra 8% of the total price of whatever it is that we're buying, right? So let's say there's a book at the store for $10. To pay for this, we actually have to pay the $10, but we also have to pay 8% of the $10 as well, right? That's going to be added on to our bill. And to find that, we would turn our 8% into a decimal. So I'm going to turn this into 800ths. And we would multiply, right? Of tells us that we are multiplying it by 10. So we'd have our $10 plus the 8% that we pay on our $10. And if we calculated that, this of course would be 80 cents plus the $10, which means we would pay a total of $10.80, right? But there's an expression we can use to help us see this for all types of problems that belong to this category, and will help us do this a little bit faster. And to do this, I'm going to use the letter B for book, and that's going to be the price of the book, but we also need to add to that another 8% of the price of the book. And altogether, we would want to combine that to figure out our total price. Well, this, of course, is that invisible 1. So if I put it together, I would have 1 and 800ths B, right? And then whatever the total price is, or excuse me, whatever the price of the book is, I can substitute that in and solve. So if there was a $25 book, I would just say, oh, I have to pay a 1 and 800ths of $25, and I would just simplify that down, and that would be 27. My total price of the book would be $27. We can do this with a sale price as well, right? If jeans are on sale for 20% off, then we can write an expression and we can try to substitute in our price to figure out how much you would actually pay. So let's say we use J for jeans, and we know that that's the price of jeans, but the sale is 20% off. So I'm going to write 20% of J. Of course, we could also just write that as 2/10, right? That means the same thing, so I'll do that. And since this is a sale, we're taking off that price, we're going to be subtracting. And if I want to combine this, this would be 1J. And so I'd think, well, what's 1J minus 2/10 of a J? That would leave me with 8/10 J. That's how much I would be spending. And if the price is $40, then I would just do 8/10 times $40, and I would find out that the price I need to pay is 32 bucks, right? I would just quickly calculate by substituting that in. We can also use this to help us solve equations, something that we've been working with, right? So this is our story here about Selwood. This is a pretty true story. So I'm going to use S for students. I'm going to try really carefully to not make it look like a 5. So I'm going to say that S is the number of students. So that's going to be the variable that I choose here. And that's the number of students that there were 10 years ago. So we know that we started with S, and since that time we have added 20% of that number. So I need to figure out 20% of S, and I'm going to write that as 20% of S, right? And of course I can just write that also as 2/10. I don't need that extra placeholder 0. And this, of course, is that invisible 1. So this is really 1 and 2/10 S. But this is an equation. I know that all of this equals 600, right? The amount before plus the extra 20% is 600. So I can actually solve this like I solve any equation. And in this case, that means dividing by 1 and 2/10 on both sides. And when we do that, we find out that I'm going to do a couple quick calculations here. 600 divided by 1 and 2/10 is 500. We know that there were 500 students 10 years ago. And that's quite a change, right? 100 extra kids. And lastly, we can also see this with inequalities. So here we have Alex, and he has a maximum amount that he wants to spend. So we're trying to figure out the most that he can spend on food. And we'll go ahead and use maybe F to be food, right? We'll use our variable F here. So we know that he has to spend some money on food, and he wants to leave a 20% tip. So on that food, he's going to add an additional 20%. But he wants that to be no more than $30. So he has to spend less than or exactly $30, right? So this is our inequality. And I'm just going to rewrite this here. This, of course, could be a 1. I'm going to combine my like terms into 1. I'm just going to do 1 and 2/10 F. I don't need that extra 0. Has to be less than or equal to 30. And then I can just solve my inequality. This is a positive coefficient, so there's nothing tricky here about it. I'm just going to divide by my number here, my coefficient. And if I do that, when I do 30 divided by 1 and 2/10, let me just do a calculation here. That ends up being 25, right? So Alex could spend less than or exactly $25, right? He can spend $25 or less. And we're going to leave you with one to try just to write on your own. You don't have to solve anything. I just want you to set up the expression right here, right? So a plane ticket, we're going to use the letter P to represent plane ticket. A plane ticket has a 7% sales tax on it. So just write the expression, similar to what we did the first example of the video, for how you would show the total cost for a plane ticket, even though we don't know what the original price was, just the expression that we could use to help us calculate the total when we include the sales tax. And remember, the essential question for this video was how can we use equations or inequalities to solve questions about percentages. And so hopefully you can see a little bit of a beginning pattern to how to do this that we'll practice more in class. Bring your notes and any questions you might have to class.